Scottish football deserves better, and this is where the change begins. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Improving Scottish Football podcast. My name is Kieran, and on the episode today we are asking what's happened to all the Scottish managers. So there are fewer Scottish managers than ever before in the Scottish Premiership, and there's only one in the English Premiership. And if you go back a few years, in 2011, there were actually 7 Scottish managers in the English Premier League. So we're going to be discussing all that and more. But before we get going, if you could hit that like or subscribe button, if you haven't done so already, that'd be hugely appreciated. And please review, ideally with 5 stars, that'd be nice. And like and share and all that good stuff. But joining me today is coach and analyst and regular contributor John Walker, and also former professional player Jamie Mitchell. So John, first of all, how are you doing?
Awesome, mate. Awesome. Especially after I feel like I hounded out one manager and I've been stuck with not quite the replacement I wanted, but we are where we are.
Cool. Well, I'm sure we'll be coming on to that in due course. And Jamie, you're making your podcast debut. How are you, first of all? And if you don't mind just giving us a little bit of an introduction to yourself as well, for those who don't know you.
Thanks for having me on, Kieran. Delighted to be on. So I was a professional footballer for 15 years. Played in England and Scotland at various levels. In fact, probably most leagues I've played in, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But Premier League up in Scotland as well for a couple of years. So done all right. I had a good career. I now have my own sports marketing business in Glasgow, where we work with sports clubs and sponsors and try to bring money in for them both. So all good, all going well, and thanks for having me on.
Good. So what were your clubs?
Have you not done your research yet? Not looked in Wikipedia. I thought you'd have.
I could tell you the clubs,
That's
but
good.
I thought you might like to tell us yourself.
Yeah, so I started off at Norwich City of all clubs. I moved down there as a young boy at the age of 12 with my mum and dad. So they moved us all down as a family and bought us a house, and we had a great time down there. So I started off my career there, come through the youth ranks, turned professional in 1995, which seems a hell of a long time ago, which I can't believe. And Martin O'Neill was the manager, so a good experience under Martin O'Neill. I then left Norwich in 1996 for being too small of all things, which is unbelievable, considering I'm 5'9". So I moved to a League Two club called Scarborough. So the Norwich assistant manager was a guy called Mick Wadsworth, which, given the topic of our podcast this evening, we can go on and talk about him pretty later on. Very interesting character, great coach, I may add. He took over as manager at Scarborough, so he took me with him. So I had 2 great years there. Moved back up to Scotland in the early 2000s, joined Clyde, won the league with Clyde, which was great. Played in the Championship, and then I joined Partick Thistle when they get promoted to the Scottish Premier League in 2002, and then I had 3 great years there, and then I had to retire through a hip injury at the age of 29, nearly 30, so I had to come out of the game prematurely, which was a severe blow and unexpected, but it's all about resilience, and I managed to come back and forge not a bad career for myself outside of football. So
you must have played against some top players when you were at Partick Thistle, and presumably the manager at that point would have been John Lambie.
Correct, yeah. John Lambie's the man that signed me, yeah, with incredible manager in my opinion, and you hear all the different stories, and obviously you go with a bit of trepidation before it, because you'd heard different bits and pieces about him, but for me it was absolutely outstanding. But yeah, I played against, so at that time, Celtic and Rangers were both exceptionally strong. Celtic got to, was it the UEFA Cup final? Yeah, against Porto. So they had Henrik Larsson and all those guys, Chris Sutton and Lennon, Lambert, Agat, all those guys. And Rangers got to last 16 in the Champions League and had your De Boers and your Moles and your Artetas and Lovenkrantz and Ambrosos and Arthur Newmans and Barry Ferguson, etc. So it was a strong league at that time, and Dundee had Ravanelli and all these guys. So there was, probably looking back, it was probably it peaked Scottish football at at that point.
Yeah, little did we know we were living through the golden age at that time.
I know, and we were having the same conversations back then as well, which is unbelievable. So, but yeah, it was the golden period, I think.
Cool. All right, so let's turn on to the kind of topic at large then. So Scottish managers are at an all-time low in the Scottish top flight. So they are David Gray, Barry Ferguson, Derek McInnes, Don Cowie, and Tony Docherty. And if you go back to, like I said, 2011, at one point there were 7 Scottish managers in charge of the 20 English Premier League clubs, which was unbelievable. Really, we're obviously just down to David Moyes. I'll come to you first, John. What do you think? What do you think is going on? Is there a bigger picture here? Has the game changed? Has it moved on? Are there fewer good Scottish managers to choose from? How do you see it?
Well, I think one of the first things is to make that number even more embarrassing is it feels like 3 of those people kind of fell into those roles. Don Cowie was already at Ross County. He was involved there, very well liked. Barry Ferguson's been brought in because of his Rangers ties, and David Gray has taken the caretaker role multiple times, and this is the first time he's been made permanent. So would those people even have been hired if it wasn't for that historical background or being in there? Probably not. So that's one concern for me. I think probably the biggest concern is the fact that Rangers and Celtic don't tend to appoint Scottish coaches, and therefore it's only going to be Rangers and Celtic managers that probably go to England and progress through those unless they're willing to take jobs in the Championship or League One and kind of build their way up from there. So that's one thing. I think the coaching from the SFA side and the coaching courses, I do think the SFA, and I'm sure you could probably get somebody on here at some point to debate this, but I think the SFA are too greedy to take money off of other countries to come in and do their licenses, where other countries tend to block out people coming over to do their licenses. They try and focus on their domestic people in there. So the SFA's coaching courses have been much lauded because of the history of Largs and people like Jose Mourinho and Andre Villas-Boas coming through. But at some point that was blocking Scottish coaches getting on these courses and pushing them through to get them better and push them forward, and it kind of became a marketing tool, I think, for other coaches to come here and get the licenses, because other countries had things like you had to play a certain amount of games at top flight football before you could get on their A licenses. Things like that, I think, are probably stopping it. I think that's a big contributor because there are so many. I mean, I would have said on my B and A, it was like a 50-50 split between Scottish coaches and outside of Scotland. So that's one thing, is that we're not getting access, because I know I couldn't have got on one in Spain, Germany, France, Italy, because I've no playing career. So that's a start. And there'll be multiple coaches like me that can't get on those courses. And yeah, I think that's a big thing, because I think what we're seeing abroad is a rise of people who maybe played the game at academy level, so they've got some sort of professional link, but went into coaching very early on, went and did the badges, and now you've got people like the Brighton manager who are like 30-year-old and they're managing the Premier League because they moved into coaching so early. So I think there's like a multitude of things going on. I think that's the big one, is the resource available to Scottish coaches getting on these courses.
Is the cost prohibitive?
Oh, the cost is awful. But to be fair to the SFA, I think the cost is pretty much in line with most places. Like I do see what Wales and Northern Ireland are charging, and by the time you are paying for digs, by the time you're paying for flights, and then taking time off work, you probably are about the same.
How many people got on the courses, John? Normally?
So before, it used to be limited to like 84 to 100, which meant there was value for money when you were charging $3,000 for a UEFA A licence plus assessment. During COVID, they ran 3 courses, I think. So you charged the same price, but you devalued it by giving it an opportunity to more coaches to come on it. And as far as I'm aware, they've continued that process and kept that available to people, which means there are more people going through the courses and you're charging the same money. So I think you're almost, it's probably good that you're getting people through the courses, but the course price should have probably dropped if you're making it more available to people.
Jamie, what do you make of it? What's your reading on why there are fewer kind of Scottish managers out there now?
Yeah, I find it a bit of a strange one, to be honest, because certainly when I played, and then the majority of people when they retired, or the majority of players when they retired, they all wanted to be coaches. And I don't think that's ever changed. I think most people, I mean, I was one of the very few, I think, that didn't want to stay in the game when I retired. So there's so many I know Scottish coaches about that are involved in the game. There's tons of them. It just seems to me, is it a lack of opportunity? Is it from the board of directors who maybe think they're trying to appease the fan base by appointing an international name purely because they come from abroad? I don't think they're any better than what we've got here. You know, you can look at the Aberdeen manager, for an example, at the moment. I know I'll probably got off on a tangent here, but he started off great as if he's the best thing ever, and now they're on this terrible run, So it's like, the answer is I do not know why we're not giving more Scottish coaches an opportunity. There's a chap called Ricky Waddle, who's manager of Caledonian Braves. Ricky, I've known since my playing days. He's got every licence going. He's got the B, A, Pro, and whatever the next for the top one is. So he's got every licence going. And I don't think Ricky would probably get a sniff of, say, the Partick Thistle job or any of these type of jobs that are available. And I don't know why. I think they'd be more likely to offer it to an international coach or manager coming in.
I mean, it's a really interesting time in Scottish football because I think a lot of clubs in the Premiership, and I guess a lot of this chat is going to be focused kind of on the top tier. A lot of the Premiership clubs are choosing to bring in international head coaches or managers. And for me, I'm excited by it, I'll be honest. I totally think obviously Scottish managers should be given the opportunity, and that's obviously the dream, that we have talented Scottish managers managing in not just the Scottish Premiership but other top leagues. But one of the issues that's been so prevalent in Scottish football for the past 20 years is the fact it's been quite insular, and you've had the same kind of names and same sort of people going round and round. And so I think that probably contributes to a lack of progression and a lack of change. And therefore, I'm excited to see new ideas. Obviously, the new Motherwell manager seems to be implementing high press, high energy. Obviously, Jimmy Tillene and obviously Valakari. So what do you think, John? You must also be slightly refreshed to see some kind of new names, new faces into Scottish football.
Yeah, as long as it's people coming with something that we can work with and improve. For me, the biggest thing would be bringing Scottish coaches along with that, and it kind of touches upon the stuff we talked with Duco James when we were talking about the backroom staff and having a solid backroom staff that could be Scottish coaches, Scottish analysts, Scottish set play coaches. And then you can bring in your foreign coach. You do not bring in their staff, because then that's a minefield of what if it goes wrong, you're paying off staff, you're putting yourself in debt. But you bring in those coaches, and you bring in a coach that's got a history of potentially progressing coaches, progressing players. So less just on the youth academy products they've brought in. How do they actually progress their staff? Do their assistant managers go and get first team jobs? Because that should be the kind of measuring stick of what you've done successfully. Or if they leave, are they leaving Ange Postecoglou left Celtic? Why, unless if Brendan Rodgers wasn't available, is John Kennedy a serious candidate? Because I think John Kennedy's an unbelievable coach, and I think he's done everything else he could at Celtic. If I look at Chris Davies, that was Rodgers' assistant, he's absolutely dominating League One with Birmingham. So Brendan Rodgers with John McGlynn when he was the analyst at Celtic, you can see the imprint he's had on Falkirk style play and the way they are. So as long as you're bringing foreign or non-Scottish coaches to the league, are they improving the staff? Are they improving the standard of coaches they're leaving behind? Are those coaches going and getting jobs and improving? That will be probably the blueprint and the drip feed that you'll start to see. Is I think that John Kennedy at some point, if he's not going to get the Celtic, has to go take or be considered for a Hearts, Hib or Aberdeen job that becomes available, because he's done everything else. If that starts to happen and you start to see those coaches, John McGlynn should, by all accounts, be in the Premier League at some point next season. Scott Brown, who worked under Brendan Rodgers, has a great case for being in the Premier League next season. So you are actually seeing the echoes of what good coaching looks like. The problem is a lot of those examples are Brendan Rodgers, and that's how do you get more of them? And so is Michael Wimmer coming? Is the staff that he's got at Motherwell going to start echoing and those people improve? And does that continue? Does St Johnstone Massimo Vallecari continue? And so on and so forth. And does that improve the coaching? Because the answer's not having hundreds of A-licensed coaches, because I've went through a non-playing career, not in football at any length, and able to get through these courses because, one, I've got money to do them, and I was eager to keep doing them and keep applying and keep getting through them. Is that the right thing? Should there be an ex-player that's got better experience than me, who's worked with good coaches and get good ideas, that should be on these coaching courses? Have I blocked one of them, potentially? So it's getting all these little things. I don't think the coaching courses are the be-all and end-all. I think working with good coaches is going to bring on better than any license the SFA can offer, or any course.
And I guess ultimately it's, we are trying to simplify this down to like Scottish managers versus foreign managers. And it's obviously all on an individual basis. And I think, even this weekend, you've seen some good coaching. Obviously, Michael Wimmer, obviously fantastic performance at Ibrox. And then obviously like David Gray, I know you were tweeting today, John, about actually, being very tactically astute, making changes in game, some nice progressive play. And also, I think you also made a general note about the fact that we're seeing less of that kind of low block defensive style of play that we've been so accustomed to. We've been crying out for something a bit more exciting, right?
Yeah, I think people are getting a wee bit of bee in the bonnet and using Rangers as like the pure measuring stick for this. Teams aren't coming after Rangers just because Rangers are poor. They were coming after Rangers because the style of play was poor. Because St Johnstone came to Ibrox off the back of Rangers beating Celtic in the last home game 3-0 and tried to play out for the back. So it is a bit of a nonsense to just be like, teams can smell blood, they're coming for us. Teams could see weaknesses in the build-out play, how easy it was to trigger. It wasn't that Rangers were poor, because Rangers had the odd ridiculous performance where you put 6 past Kilmarnock, you put a good performance in against Tottenham, you beat Nice 4-1 away, so there was stuff there. What I seen was good coaches that went, we can actually go and press them really aggressively if we get up against them. People were at Motherwell sat in for the last half hour. Motherwell have changed their manager during the season, and Andy Halliday was saying they're doing things like double sessions in the season. Those are things that are usually used for your off-season or your kind of January break, but he's using them because he needs to get his ideas across. So Motherwell players are absolutely shattered yesterday after half an hour, after 60 minutes, and that's why they fell away. It wasn't that Rangers had them pinned in or they were low blocking. It was they had nothing left in them to go press and to do all the running they were doing. It was that simple. So that, David Gray, I think that could be an example of, has David Gray seen a lot? Because Lee Johnson down in England is considered a great coach, a really, really good coach. Sean Maloney is obviously kind of earned his stripes with Belgium. Didn't quite work out at Hibs, but has David Gray maybe seen some of these things with Jack Ross as well and been like, if I take little tweaks off of all these people and get time to implement my own style on top of that, are you seeing David Gray kind of echoing from the people that he's maybe leaned on or learned from or seen? And does that improve there? This is what I think is going to happen. But David Gray is someone that I think everyone probably had him sacked 12 weeks ago, but I'm now seeing something that I never thought I would see, and I think that's maybe just came from confidence of us getting results, players then buy in, and then you can then convince people that this is how you play, this is what you do. And I think I'm now seeing something where I would be able to pick tactically what he's doing and the little tweaks he's doing. I said for the Rangers game, Rangers were 2-0 up at Easter Road after the Old Firm, and he moved Campbell from number 10 to right centre mid and went with a flat 3. Won the game 3-1 from then on. They were absolutely dominant. They were absolutely brilliant. That's something that got overlooked. It just got looked as Rangers collapsing. And that, again, you could point to is then we're onto the media and then we're onto a whole different argument about it. But I think maybe not enough respect given there. But I think there's things that are improving and things that are getting better.
Jamie, talk to me a little bit about your perspective. We were talking before we were recording about the difference between a manager and a head coach.
Yeah, I think this debate leads into that nicely, because I think what John was saying there about Sean Maloney and these guys and David Gray taking bits and pieces from the different coaches, I think the big thing about David Gray is maybe he's just a better manager than those guys and be able to manage the players a bit better. For me, there has to be a manager and a coach. I think there'll be different opinions of this, but from my own experience, I think you need a kind of managerial figure at the helm and a head coach underneath, both working in tandem together to get the best out for the team and individual players. And I think with specific certain coaches, they can be the best coach in the world, but if they can't deliver that message or the players aren't taking on board or listening to what they're saying, it doesn't matter. So that's where I think they both work in tandem together. I get the argument or the debate that the game's evolved a wee bit and maybe it's different to, 10, 15, 20 years ago, but I don't think it's changed that much. I still think you need to get the best out of each individual player and get the team working collectively. And for me, you need a kind of manager at the helm that takes a step back and just observes and watches everything in training. Watches the body language of the players. I could use Martin O'Neill as an example of that. He didn't take any training, but he was there at every training session. He just watched. Maybe interject every so often when he was something he didn't like. But he had Steve Walford, who was a great coach, doing all the coaching, and both of them worked well together. I touched on him earlier. Mick Wadsworth was England coach, so he was at the 1990 World Cup with Bobby Robson and one of the head coaches there. And Mick's highly regarded in England, and he was Gretna manager. I don't know if you guys remember him from Gretna. He was Gretna manager about 2007, 2008.
Is that when Gretna were in the top flight?
Yeah, I think it would have been, yes. So he'd been brought up from England, and he's got a great reputation down there, as I say. And he was at the World Cup and stuff like that. He said high profile coaching roles at Sheffield United, Norwich, different kind of bigger clubs. But he's been a manager in his own right a few times as well. And I unfortunately had him as a manager at Scarborough, and he was the best coach in the world. We were playing 4-3-3 at the time. The centre halves were splitting. The set midfield was a wee bit what they try to do nowadays. The defensive midfielders come to get the ball and stuff like that, and players going wide. But he was the worst man manager that I've ever experienced. And he didn't know how to deal with young players. He didn't know how to get his message across. He would just shout and ball. He'd pin you up against the dressing room wall. There's so many stories I could tell about him. So despite the fact he was a fantastic coach, unfortunately, he wasn't a great manager. And that proves my point. I think for me, and I think Barry Ferguson's done that a wee bit. I don't think Barry Ferguson's a coach. I think when he's come in as a manager and he's got Neil McCann and Billy Dodds behind him. So I think Neil McCann, especially, come to me from the outside looking in, looks an absolutely fantastic coach. And Ferguson's just at the one at the sides watching and observing and being that figurehead. But I'm sure I'll get shot down from some people for this. Too traditional. But I think they should both work in tandem together.
What was John Lambie like? Is he from your kind of more old school Scottish manager type?
Yes. But he had a way of, his man management was the total opposite. His man management was fantastic because what he did was he knew every individual player inside out. So he knew which worked for one player and which wouldn't work for the other. And he would take you into his manager's office. He would have a conversation with you. He would, maybe throw a wee grenade in at you a couple of times where you would react. But then he would also tell you how good you were the previous Saturday if you'd played well, that type of stuff. For me, I would run through a brick wall from him, and that's what I think is lacking a wee bit with some modern day kind of coaching, shall we call it. We've got all the technical side of things, which I think is needed, and all the data and all our analytics and all the fantastic coaching. But for me, I still think there's an element of it that you need to have the players willing to do everything they can for the club and for the manager. And I think Rangers is evident of that at the moment. They've down tools. They're nice footballers, some of them. But you could have the best coach in the world with these guys, and I still don't think they'd be. You could have Mourinho at the side or Guardiola, and honestly, I still think they would struggle at times. And that to me, that's down to individual management of players.
Yeah, we do obviously have quite a rich history in that. Obviously Ferguson, but even you saw it with Moyes. When he came back into Everton a couple of months ago, there was videos of him just going around seeing all the training ground, the groundsmen and stuff, just saying hi and everything like that.
From the murmurs, obviously, it can only take with a pinch of salt what you hear through the grapevine, but I think a lot of what was coming out of Rangers camp was that similar idea, was that actually Clement was wanting to do all the coaching and was also not a great man manager. The players didn't really warm to him. And you can cut and dry it any way you want. You can say players getting paid 25 grand a week and should do X, Y, and Z. It doesn't matter what people get paid in football. It doesn't matter what level. See if everyone's the same. See if you don't like your boss, your performance isn't going to be great. I've worked in offices where I've loved my boss, and every day's been a doddle, no matter what I'm doing. And I've worked in places where I've hated my boss, and every day has been shocking. It affects your social life, it affects your personal life, it affects you getting up in the morning, going into work. Footballers aren't exempt for that just because they get paid to be footballers. And I think that's the biggest problem. But I think the problem Rangers have got is Rangers haven't even figured out how to get the right man to do all of that. I think Celtic haven't been lucky. Celtic have maybe a little bit lucky that Brendan Rodgers became available again when the opportunity for Ange Postecoglou leaving presented itself. But Celtic appointed Brendan Rodgers because they knew what they wanted. They appointed Ange Postecoglou because they knew what they wanted, and they had that interim where they brought an ex-player back in Neil Lennon and realised that it wasn't for them and it was going to stifle what they had done well, which was sell players on for big money because they were able to improve them through good coaching. Brendan Rodgers and Ange Postecoglou, kind of same ideas, same methodology, but from looking at Postecoglou, I think Postecoglou took training for about 3 or 4 weeks when he first came in, and then was like, I trust John Kennedy, I trust Gavin McStay, and then they took training and he just watched, and that was it. That was him. Sit back, on you go. So there's probably a perception that Ange Postecoglou, because of the style of football he wants to play, was the one doing all the training, all the coaching. But it was John Kennedy. It was John Kennedy led all the time. So that's what I'm saying when I say John Kennedy's obviously like a brilliant coach. He's obviously at an elite level. Worked under Martin O'Neill, Brendan Rodgers. He's kind of ticking all the boxes you would want. So you've kind of got that. So you need to be able to do both. If you don't know what makes people tick or makes different personalities tick, doesn't matter how good you are at coaching, doesn't matter how detailed you are, you're going to struggle.
Yeah, totally agree.
Let's talk about someone who is having quite a bit of success, which is one of your favourite people on the planet, John, Ian Cathro. Manager of the month in Portugal in February. Estoril seem to be doing quite well under him. And I think he's still only 36.
38 this year, actually, I think it is turning, I think.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Talk to us a little bit about Ian. And obviously, he didn't have a great record at Hearts, but he obviously suffered quite a bit through the Scottish football media and in the Scottish football bubble. So how good is it for you to be seeing him doing so well?
It's brilliant, mate, but I think Jamie's probably hit the nail on the head with what we were just talking about there. I think Ian Cathro is probably somebody that reeks of when he got the Hearts job, he kind of went within himself a little bit and he lost that man management side, whereas Ian Cathro, I remember hearing about Ian Cathro like 3 years before he got the Hearts job. Everyone was talking about his coaching because he was running the box soccer and he had people, that was what Ryan Gauld and John Suter did in their extracurriculum at 13-14. So he was very well known as being this like really good detailed technical coach, and it was all foreign ideas. It was all about how you got players in the ball in pockets and how you got people playing through lines, and it was this kind of, oh, who's this guy? And he was kind of outside as well because he was doing the licenses, done them in the SFA, but nobody really knew who he was, but they were all impressed by him whenever he came across. And then I think the managerial role just kind of, he was dealing with seasoned pros who weren't into it, and then how do you then get them back on for the ride? The minute they're off the train, you're screwed. That's you done. So the Hearts one was suicide. You had people like Chris Boyd and that in the media. It was done. It was over for him. But he just went back to coaching and then worked with he'd already worked with Rafa Benitez, but he went back to Nuno Espirito Sanchez. He's went round the Premier League. He's went around different places. But he also took time out to kind of just sit back when Nuno went into the next job, which I thought was a bit mental at the time because I thought Nottingham Forest was a great gig for him to get back to and be back in the Premier League. But he must have realised he wanted to go back into head coaching and he'd maybe kind of learn some lessons. But see if you go look in the Scots Abroad page at the end of August, there was a Estoril fan who was like, the guy's funny, the guy like kind of jokingly takes everything back now, and he's like, we just couldn't understand him because he was Scottish. We thought he was miserable, thought he was arrogant. And again, it's kind of that way, but they all warm to him now. They think the football's amazing. They hear for the players that the training's unbelievable, the detail's amazing. And they all love him because he's still young. And that's what they kind of vibe with now, is because football's, kind of changed a little bit, where the season pros are now kind of people that were Ian Cathro's age and kind of look more for the Ian Cathro type characters than the managers who go through you and kind of borderline abuse you. That's kind of dead. So I just think that's what's kind of Ian Cathro's just kind of found the right timing now, and he was probably too early on it. But I think it's brilliant now. I remember my total opinion changed on Ian Cathro because I'd never heard much from him outside of the Hearts interviews. But when he did Graham Hunter's podcast, and he just seemed like an absolute kind of hard nosed person. The way he spoke about football, the way he was like, I mean, see, if you're not going to work hard, you'll never play in an Ian Cathro team. And I was like, oh, that didn't feel like that was the way it was. It felt like you were getting taken advantage of at Hearts. So he kind of had that kind of hardline disciplinarian side on him. And I was like, you've probably got what it is to go and be a manager now. You just need to kind of dust off that Hearts situation. But I do think he was always an unbelievable coach, and that was probably a fine example of one of those. But a lot of that was because of relationships he made from coaches outside the UK and was working with a lot when he was like 23, 24, 25.
Jamie, have you seen much of or heard much of Ian Cathro since his Hearts days?
Oh, that's interesting to hear. I mean, but it's actually spot on about what we're talking about. I think he's probably been just too young to take that Hearts job. And by that, I mean, from a player's point of view, looking at him, they'd probably be thinking, look at this young guy try to tell me what to do type thing. I probably know better than him. So he's fighting against that straight away. And there's no doubt he's an absolutely fantastic coach. It's been proven. But I think he was probably just too young and too fresh-faced, if that makes sense. And I think now that the fact he's maybe 37 or 38, a wee bit more mature, shall we say, I think you would see a different Ian Cathro if he went into one of the Scottish Premier League jobs now. He wouldn't be different in terms of his style and what he's want to do, but I think the players' maybe perceptions and how they maybe receive him would be different. So you would probably see a better team that if he's managing. I think they would do really well, and it's one to keep an eye on. Even for a Rangers job, like somebody like that, you probably get shot down for saying that. A lot of people because of the perceptions that people might think. But sometimes we need to, as we're discussing, it's a fantastic Scottish coach. So why would you go for somebody maybe an unknown foreign name when you've got a guy like Ian Cathro who's proven himself over and over again?
Yeah, I think the Hearts job did come a little bit too early, not just in terms of his age, but also where Scottish football has evolved from and to. Because at that point when he came in, the idea that a career coach would take the helm of a Scottish Premiership club was was unheard of, because everyone was so used to that same route, as in it has to be an ex-professional player who's played in the top flight in Scotland, who knows the league, who knows the club, and that's the journey, and everyone knows each other. And you have seen the rise of the career coach, and the career coach is making it to the very top of the game. So now I think the path is well trodden enough that people would kind of respect that career journey now. But yeah, I mean, some of the stuff he got lumped with, like back in the day, like I remember like Chris Boyd saying like he just wants to like play FIFA on his laptop, and stuff like that. It was kind of just bullying in the media.
Yeah. The same when Big Ange joined as well at Celtic when Postecoglou took over. There was an ignorance to the fact that we've got an Australian coming over to manage Celtic, and it was, what's he done in the game? He's managed in Australia, he's managed in Japan, nobody knows him. He lost his first game at Hearts, was it? And I think the knives were out from then, and then all of a sudden, he gets his ideas across, and as John says, I think that 4 weeks at the beginning got his style. Players were, loving it, brought a few of his own men in, and players, I know he didn't have any of his own staff, did he? He worked with the Celtic staff, but there's a guy that could just take control of a club. And that's what Rangers need, a guy that can take control of the club on and off the pitch. And Postecoglou took control of Celtic on the pitch at that period of time, and they're still reaping the rewards from it, from Maeda and all these guys that he brought in. But initially that was our ignorance a wee bit to say, why have we got an Australian manager coming in, and why are we buying players from Japan, etc., etc. So we're in a far better place nowadays to to know that there's far and wide coaches everywhere and across Europe and across the world. But for me, still, I think there's great Scottish coaches, going back to our original topic of conversation, that maybe don't get an opportunity, like we said at the beginning. And it's trying to understand why they're not getting an opportunity ahead of guys like Michael Wimmer, who's come in and had 2 games and had a good result on Saturday against Rangers, but we've obviously dissected that. But Stuart Kettlewell beat Rangers when he was Motherwell manager. Stuart Kettlewell beat Celtic when he was Ross County manager. And he's a Scottish guy and he's getting a bit lambasted at the moment. So it's, for me, I think we're a bit too quick to jump on the Scottish coaches a wee bit when things maybe don't go as well as planned. And it's great that Hibs have stuck with David Gray when it could quite easily, they could have pulled the trigger on him. And they're reaping the rewards at the moment. So, for me, yes, it's great to have foreign coaches coming in, but I still think we need to, look at our own coaches as well and give them the opportunities.
John, were you going to chime in with something?
No, I actually think Stuart Kettlewell is a good example of what I'd almost refer to as one of the coaches that kind of is outside of what I would call historical Scottish coaching, because just from listening to Andy Halliday, the amount of detail that he goes into in his analysis, the amount of detail he goes into when he's working on phases of play, Stuart Kettlewell probably is one of the coaches that I would pinpoint to being like someone that I'd heard a lot of positive stuff about the way in which his ideas are presented to the players and the way he works with players. So I think he probably is like the poster boy a little bit. I just think it's one of those ones whereby he was probably right to step away from the old job because of personal things that were going on. And there is like a line, right? Like, I think when you get to Rangers and Celtic manager, the abuse can be warranted when you're getting like 1.5 million a year and 3 million a year. I think when you're Stuart Kettlewell and you're like wanting to fight people out, people want to fight you outside, you're like steady on a bit. You know where I live, and it's feasible that you could so maybe just calm down a little bit. So I think he's somebody that will come back in pretty quickly. I think he'll get a decent gig as well. And I think he'll be one that I don't think this is the last time we see Stuart Kettlewell in the Scottish Premier League, for example. I think he's more than capable of going and getting a club from Championship and getting them back in the Premier League and taking it from there.
Yeah, it'll just be somebody will just need to take a chance on him, and hopefully they do, because hopefully he's not tarred by what's happened in the last month or two. And that may well put some clubs off. Hopefully it doesn't, but that's where we need the board of directors to be a bit strong about it and say, well, actually look at his coaching ability and managing ability rather than the outside noise that was happening. So, I've been on the receiving end of stuff when I played. It's horrendous, and you do. I remember playing for Partick Thistle against Clyde, and it's like, obviously I used to play for Clyde, so it was like some of the shouts I got when I was playing, it was like, when I was warming up, you can feel the blood boiling. And then you think, oh, I need to be professional here, and but it's so hard, and it's one of them. Was he right to say what he did? Well, only time will tell. But for him, I think he can keep his head up, and he's proven himself in a coaching and managerial. Absolutely, so he should get another opportunity. But yeah, I think he's a classic example, as you say, John, of a really good Scottish coach. And there's a few, as I said, mentioned a few others as well, that are in their kind of mid to late 30s and early 40s and looking for an opportunity. I just worry at times, or it's a concern at times, that we really need to think, oh, we'll go abroad to get these specialist coaches and managers. I'll probably contradict myself because I've talked about Ange, but what I'm trying to say is I think we should look everywhere, and it's whoever the best candidate for the role is, whether it be Scottish, Australian, Japanese, whatever, whoever the best candidate for that particular club and role should get the opportunity.
Yeah. And the other key thing that obviously Stuart Kettlewell's got going for him is his ability to bring in youth as well, and that having that track record is phenomenal, and I think really sets him apart in Scottish football. So
yeah,
I'm sure there'll be plenty of other clubs who are thinking we need to get better at developing our player pathways. So
yeah, Stuart could maybe go abroad. It could be one of them, like we talked about, maybe a Scottish manager going down south or trying his luck in, like a few others have done in France, Portugal, Belgium. So you can maybe think of that path as well, which may be an opportunity for him to go away, do well abroad and then come back, because he's still only, I think Stuart's only, I don't know, 39 or something, or 40. So he's still got plenty of time on his side. So maybe it'll be one of them that he goes abroad and, does an Ian Cathro and does well at a few, and then comes back refreshed and not ready to jump into the crowd.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to see more Scottish managers going abroad. I mean, we've had such a great success with players, in recent years. It'd be fantastic to see more of them going and getting that experience in top leagues in Europe.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just I really don't know if it's a Scottish thing or what, but or a British thing. There's not many English managers go abroad, really, was there? Or maybe a bit more nowadays, but thinking back, there was always reluctance to go abroad. It always seemed as if, oh, they'll come here to our shores. But the thing, I mean, I wish I'd have played abroad when I played. I mean, at 25, 26, 100% should have went abroad. So it's like, if you're given the opportunity, then for me, it's one of them you should be thinking, yep, I'm going. I'm just going to Spain, Portugal, if your life allows it, of course. Life, not wife. Uh, and cut your teeth abroad. And it would be great to see more Scottish managers abroad.
Good. John, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think, well, are we going to talk about Barry Ferguson a bit now? We're going to go into him.
Yeah, okay, right. Let's do a quick little thing at the end of the pod. Yeah, go on then. Give us your Barry.
So I think one of the examples we've got here is Barry Ferguson's come in, got given the Rangers job. I don't think anyone, barring a Europa League triumph and winning that trophy, I don't think anyone foresees Barry Ferguson being the Rangers manager past the 1st of June. I think it's a limited time. I don't think it matters how good a coach Neil McCann is, how good Billy Dodds is. I think they're there to see it over until the owners take over and the owners appoint. Now, I've been slaughtered for this, but I think anyone that's serious about Rangers competing with Celtic and Rangers having a style of play they want and Rangers having your best Scottish coach available is Russell Martin, and it's not even close. He's available. He's there. You've got this kind of weird situation with the 49ers who Russell Martin actually stopped them getting promoted with Leeds as Southampton manager. He beat them both times that season. So there's kind of context there as to why he might be a candidate. He's got the style of play that Rangers fans want, although Rangers fans don't want Russell Martin because, and this is one of the things that kind of bothers me a little bit, and I think maybe something that's hindered Barry Ferguson's actual coaching career, is if a player has played for Rangers or Celtic, irrespective of their coaching credentials and experience, you do tend to see them kind of blocked out of jobs. Kevin Thompson, most clubs don't want Kevin Thompson anywhere near their applications because he's an ex-Rangers player. That has a problem. Barry Robson was similar until he got the Aberdeen job. A lot of this will happen. It will probably happen with Scott Brown if those big jobs become available. He won't be able to go to Hearts, Dundee United, Dundee. They'll not want him there. There'll be a lot of that bias there. Russell Martin, I think, was touted for the Celtic job before Ange got it. I think they were or maybe when Ange was leaving, before they realised Brendan Rodgers was available. He was one that people were quite keen on because they were hearing about his style of play and the way he was aggressive, the way he kept possession. I think he just ticks loads of boxes. And then I think the flip side of him is if anyone's heard him talk or the players that have played with him, there's not a single player that didn't love him. And there's not a single player that didn't stand by him. Even at Southampton, when they were absolutely horrendous in the Premier League there before he got sacked, every player was positive about him. And it wasn't your usual where you kind of felt like, what's a player meant to say? Players were very clear that they understood what the manager wanted. They wanted him to stay there because they liked the way they played football. They liked what they were trying to do, and it kind of meshed with what the players were able to do. All those things kind of box tick for me. He's got the experience of being at a horrendous Rangers team. All those little things, whereas I think Barry Ferguson's experience is actually almost... Barry Ferguson talked a lot about he's been at Rangers during bad days. Not in the way that some of those players are there just now. Like, some of those players have seen 5-6 seasons of no wins. Barry Ferguson maybe went 18 months without a trophy at Rangers. That's the kind of bad experience he's talking about. It's not necessarily like a way to relay it. I actually think I've heard a wee bit that Barry Ferguson's actually a very good on-field coach. Charlie Gilmore, who's Inverness just now, worked with him at Alloa and said he was like phenomenal, a phenomenal coach. Everything was detailed and meticulous. There wasn't actually like this gap between like player knowledge and level he was at. He felt like the players totally understood what they wanted to do. The biggest problem he had was like players working nights and stuff and not turning up for training. Yeah. That was a bit he struggled with managing. So I actually think the opposite I've heard of Barry Ferguson with like the Rangers role is that he actually is a really good coach and he will be able to coach his ideas with the help of Neil McCann. I just think it doesn't matter what he does. Is like Barry Ferguson will not be given the chance. Barry Ferguson's best bet is maybe that he performs well or decent at Rangers, and somebody else, maybe in England, is willing to take a punt on him and look at him as a coach. I just that would be the biggest thing, because if he does, even if he's semi good at Rangers just now, he's not going to get offered the Aberdeen job. He's not going to get a Hibs or Hearts job. The Rangers thing's going to go in front of that. And I think that's going to happen. That would happen to John Kennedy, I think, as well. And that's where I think you might block a lot of good coaches, because you're probably a bit old fan bias for me here, but if you've got coaching staff in at Rangers and Celtic who are Scottish coaches coming through, they're probably working with the best players, testing themselves with the best coaches and managers, and therefore you would hope are going to be of the highest quality and standard to go and manage in other places. But I think we've got this kind of unique country where it's like, yeah, but where do they go and work? Like, let's be honest.
I'm in agreement with John. I think Russell Martin would be a fantastic appointment. And I think there's a lot of people maybe turn their nose up at him because of he played for Rangers, as John said, during the bleakest of times in 2017, 2018. And then he played for Scotland and he wasn't great either. We didn't really know much about him. So people have this bias of Russell Martin. But actually, when you look at his teams and how he plays, and as John says, what his players, which for me is the most important thing, what his players say about him, feel about him, I think he would be an amazing appointment. And one that I think could happen. So yeah, I would love Russell Martin. Barry Ferguson, I think it's a sensible appointment for where Rangers are at the moment. I don't know who else they could have maybe brought in, because let's be honest, this period of time between now and the end of May, we've got 10, 11 games left. You know, I think majority of Rangers fans and players, by the looks of it, want the season over. Mm-hmm. So who first of all, who would come in those circumstances? Not many people. So I think they've looked at it and thought, we need somebody who can relate to the fans, maybe galvanises a wee bit, and take us through at the end of the season. So that's why I think Ferguson is a sensible appointment. And as I said, I'm a big fan of Neil McCann, so I think he's a great addition as well. But I think it'd be exceptionally unfair to judge Barry Ferguson in the next few months, because for me, the calibre of player at Rangers at the moment, and it pains me to say, is astonishingly low, given the money they get. It's painful to watch, and it's, you know, I just can't believe some of their performances at the moment. So yeah, on that dreary note, I mean, when I played, we had Tata, De Boer, Moyes, Lovenkrands, Amoruso, so we're all, you know, guys coming into Scotland to play for the club, but they all had passion, they all wanted to play, they all, you know, they took Rangers to the heart, even when they weren't doing well. And you look at some of the players, and now you look as if they've got the world on their shoulders, and it looks to me as if they'd rather be anywhere else but Ibrox when they play on a Saturday, and that's a hard thing to change. So for Barry, he's on a I don't know, a hiding to nothing, I think.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that probably brings the pod to a close, guys. John, is there anything final you want to add, or are you happy to wrap up?
I'm happy to wrap up.
Okay, good. I'm sure we'll be talking more about the Rangers situation in due course. But listen, gents, thank you so much for coming along. I really appreciate you both being here, and a big thank you to everyone who was listening.